Hello and good morning. You're very welcome to this session of Enterprise University. I can see there we've got some more attendees just joining in, and you're very welcome wherever you are around the globe this morning or this evening. So let me just get started, and we'll go through what we're going to cover off in today's session. So let me just share my screen with you. So today we are all things services. So if this is your first time to join us in the Enterprise University, you will learn about obviously one particular feature and function within the Enterprise platform. And of course, as always, this session is fully recorded and will be made available to you on our website after. So let's dive right into Module 2 on services, and let's look at what we are going to cover off, and just to touch base with the curriculum that's ahead of us. So if you joined me for the first module there 2 weeks ago, we covered everything in relation to CRM and sales. And of course, today we're all about services, and then we'll move on to procurement. We'll have accounting, banking. We'll have quite a detailed session on stock, so that'll be covered over 3 lessons. And of course, we will move on to production and reporting as well, and of course expenses. So lots more to come. So do stay on board as best as you can. And of course, just to remind you that this is CPD accredited, so we can let you know where to find all of the information at the end of the term. So today's lesson, what is it all about? So what we'll do is just a quick recap on what we covered in lesson 1, just to remind you about exactly what was covered, particularly if you weren't able to attend the session. And today we will look at the overview of services. So what in your business can services be used for? And particularly if you're maybe not a service industry, that you can look outside the box and potentially use it for other aspects of your business. So that's what we'll say there. So where we'll cover that off within the business, adding service calls. So how easy it is to actually add a service call into the system. The customer portal. So we mentioned this back in lesson 1, and this is giving or empowering your customers to add transactions or add information into the system that will update your enterprise organization. We will also look at brand new functionality, which was introduced in the October release, which is the SLAs on service calls. So we'll dive into that in more detail as well. And of course, what's involved in getting Enterprise set up to utilize all of the services and functionality. We will then focus on managing projects. So this is where you can manage projects utilizing service calls, but it all comes directly from your sales order. So there's more to come around that. And in particular, I will be doing a live demonstration around how to manage those service calls and bring the project phases through the system. And it's just on a very simplistic form, just to show you how easy it is to set it up and use it. So just a quick recap on lesson 1. We covered everything in relation to master data. So all about the importance of the master data and ensuring that anything that you add through the system, so all of those customers, suppliers, your prospects, all the data that you record against those particular records, that you utilize the fields and information that's there. If you need additional fields, you obviously have the ability to define custom fields. So it's important that you understand the value of the information that you're putting into the system. We also looked at CRM, how to add your leads, take them through the pipeline and progress them through all of the different stages. And of course, analyzing the dashboard for all the different CRM KPIs that are available. We looked at the full sales transactions flow. So we focused in on what the different types of sales transactions that there are, and where from source, for example, taking you from quote right through to sales order, to delivery, and of course, ultimately to invoicing, and of course, to get paid, how that all flows through the sales module very simply. We also looked at the sales dashboard and any initial setups that are required as well for you to start using the sales and CRM. We looked at advanced sales. So that was all around email and billing. recurring sales, so being able to set invoicing or any of your transactions as a recurrence in the system. We also looked at, again, we touched on the customer portal. So again, you're giving power to the customer to add in an invoice, not to add in an invoice, but to add in a sales order or to pay an invoice, more importantly, so to get those bills paid. So allowing them to see the transactions outstanding on their accounts and to go in and pay the invoices. So let's focus in now on customer services management. So what does that mean in Enterprise? So very simply, you can track all of your service calls that are logged through the system. You can assign them to a queue. You can assign them to technicians, to multiple technicians. So for example, if you have technicians that are on the road, you can schedule in those service calls to ensure that those calls are done on time and that the technician knows exactly where they need to be at any given day or time or morning or afternoon in the week. You can manage customer projects. So this is where we will look at the project and billing at the end in the live demonstration. So see the tasks on all calendars. So that's all around your resource planner. So that's where you've scheduled in all of those service calls. So whether you've allocated those to a queue, to a technician, to an engineer that's on the road, that you can see exactly the progress of those particular service calls and when they are due to take place through the resource planner. You can assign multiple technicians as well, and you will see as well as you're assigning service calls and technicians to service calls, there's another layer as well that you can even bring into that around compliance and around skill sets. So I'll alert you to all of these different elements as we go through them so that you're fully aware of all those functions that perhaps you hadn't even thought of using or could be used within your business. So just to give you an overview of services itself. So I've mentioned already that service calls can be created for multiple technicians. You can use queues. So if a queue is something important to you, and this could be something that's all internal as opposed to external, for example. You can schedule all of those service calls as well. So again, whether it's the technician on the road or whether it's just your internal support department or engineers or those that are on call on the phone or out on the road. It doesn't matter. So it starts off with the service call itself, which you can plan and schedule. You can make those recurring. So for example, if you have items under warranty or license with a particular customer and you want to ensure that a technician calls out every quarter or every month to check on the machine, for example, let's say you've leased a machine to the customer for the year and you want to ensure that that machine is maintained and serviced, you can have a recurring service call for that. And of course, we mentioned about the customer portal, about being able to give your customer the ability to view all of these different activities as they happen. And then, of course, managing projects. So this is something I will go into detail because, of course, this is very much something centered around our own business as well as a service provider for you as well, and how we manage the projects and how we bring them through on the different phases and just get visibility on who is spending time on the project, any of the activities, the hours, is it within budget? Has it gone over the hours? So of course exceeded the budget on the project. So just being able to monitor all of that information. And of course, as with all of our other modules within Enterprise, we have a dashboard. And of course, the dashboard has got some great key KPIs for you to analyze the service module even further. So a service call. What is a service call? What can you use a service call for? Because this is what I really want to bring it down for you, because this might be something you haven't even thought about using. So service calls, it's not just for engineers and service engineers or technicians on the road. Service calls could be used for internal purposes. So IT issues, if you have a large IT department and you need to monitor all of the calls that are being logged by your employees, and you want to ensure the timely responses. Perhaps there's audits and so forth that are being done and updates, and you want to track all of that information. Well, why not use the service calls for that purpose? Another good example is requests for training. So for continuous CPD, if you want to record the fact that there's a phase of rollout for training for certain employees or for certain teams, and you want to record that, which you could do, of course, as a project, but you could also just do that as a standard service call and then record all of the activities as and when they take place. You can, of course, use it for recording complaints, on-site visits, repeated on-site visits. So I think I've mentioned there already about the items that potentially are under warranty that might need service and repair. So you need to be out on site or have a technician out on site, for example, on a monthly or quarterly basis. So you can use the service calls and of course schedule those service calls or the activities around those service calls as well. They can also be scheduled. Customer support queries. So ultimately, that's something that we manage ourselves in-house. So all of the calls that come into us, they're all managed through the service module, through a service call. And then for all of the activities, so whether that's chat, whether that's a phone call, whether that's a live direct webinar or dial-in, Teams call, etc., they're all recorded then as activities against that service call. So that's all very important in a service industry as well. And of course, the project phases. So we'll see that in detail, that when you have a service call that is part of a project, how you can then manage that and then track that all the way through the system. So really this is just to open your mind as to the possibilities of what service calls can be used for. So giving you a little bit of opportunity to think outside the box, perhaps it's a function that you're not fully utilising, how you can use it better within the system. So looking at a service call, so I'm just bringing your attention back to how we show a service call currently. We've done a lot of work this year, as you know, throughout the system, particularly around the UI, and that is what information you see now when you open up any transaction within the system. And of course, that also applies here to our service calls. So when you look in the service calls tab here and you look at a service call, you get a lot of information just even looking at the title bar of the service call. So I can see my service call number, I can see the customer that it relates to. I've got a pink highlight against the customer name. So that obviously means there's a WISE tag or WISE panel associated with that. So of course, if it's for the customer, it's going to give me more information against the customer account. I can also see the status of this particular service call. I can see what priority level it's been given. So we can see there medium. I can also see there's another status there now, which is called overdue. So if you were with me on the October release webinar, I would have been able to explain to you that that's now a new status that we have against customers who have an SLA agreement. So where you've assigned an SLA agreement, we have the ability to track those service calls, and if they have exceeded their expected closing date, you will get an overdue status on that service call. So already you're getting a lot of information around that service call, and if the agreement with the customer was to always return and resolve issues within 6 hours and you've exceeded that, so that should be a flag, a red flag of course, to highlight the fact that KPIs have not been matched. So we'll a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. But just in terms of the overall service call itself, just on this level as well, we can see the progress bar. So we can see that the service call started 19 days ago. That's probably fine for a project if you've got maybe a 30-day scope with a project. But of course, with general service calls, you expect to have those turned around a lot faster. We've got creation date and time, expected closing date, and then of course some of the contact information relating to that customer, such as the contact name, phone, email, location, salesperson. And over on the right then we have the status. We also have the stock item, which is something we introduced earlier this year. So if this relates to a specific item, so I mentioned about service calls for items under warranty or repair or service, that you can make sure that you link in that stock item as well to your service call. And another important piece we introduced this year as well was being able to associate a service call with a project. So this will be important around your project phases to ensure that you know which service call relates to which project in the system. And of course, the user, or if it's a queue, that the service call has been assigned to. In addition to that, of course, there's so much more information in between that as well to do with the technicians and who you've allocated it to, whether or not it's been scheduled, but we'll have a look at that as well. But in addition to just the basic information on a service call, of course, as with all of our transactions throughout the system, if there's more important information outside of what we provide as a standard field, you can, of course, define custom fields against a service call. So they'll be important, and this all goes back to master data. Again, referring back to what we covered in lesson 1, master data is important, and it's important to ensure that if there is information that is important to record against a service call, for example, that you define that as well in your custom fields and record that information. Because don't forget that when you review and view those service calls in your grid, you've got all of those columns that you can also bring into view. And through those columns, you can make up additional reports that you require to the filter report options. So you can always report on and analyze that information as you go along. Also very important against a service call are all the activities. So this is where you can simply just get access to adding those activities. As you can see, activities has its own grid. Also has its own grid where you can do filtered reports on it, and you can add on additional columns because again, you can have custom fields against activities as well. So again, all about the data, all about what information am I recording, what information is going to be important to me as I move forward. We also have the ability to add an attachment. So if there's any documents that are important, and again, probably around service calls. So good example like ourselves, we're recording service calls, you send us in a query and we might ask you for a print screen, or we might capture a screen if we're on a chat with you, or we might, if we're having a Teams call, we might just say, look, let me just grab that screen and we'll take that as an attachment and just upload it then directly onto the service call. So if for any reason going forward the issue was to ever arise again, you always have a way to look back and see, well, what did we do at the time to resolve it? What was the screen at the time? What did it actually say? Was it the same error? Was it something slightly different? This is also a good idea as well with items under warranty or service. If the technician is out on the road, they can also take a picture and attach, so to say, machine is in good in good shape, or in fact that it needs replacement or repair, they can take a picture, and of course that will upload an attachment to the service call as well. And of course, as with all of our transactions throughout the system, and it's no different here for a service call, you can add transactions, so you can have a related transaction. Now I'll show you that on the live demo, particularly when we go to create the project, and you will see that the sales order will be related to the service call. Additional workflows around your service calls. So this is just the top bar that you would see when you go into the service call itself. You have the bell. And the importance of the bell is you can get notified of any changes to your service call. And this bell, as you know, is available throughout all of our transactions, and it's just as important for your service calls. So is it important to you to ensure that you have notification of any changes around that service call, particularly if it's a sensitive customer, particularly if it's somebody that you want to ensure that they're getting the right service, the level of service, on time as well in terms of phone calls, meetings, call outs, technicians on the road, etc., that you can follow that service call through and track all of the progress. Of course, is seen in the notification center, which you can access directly from the top of your screen within the web application. And of course, you've got a share button there as well. The share button is your email. As you know, you can do a share of your service call. We are bringing in an additional function to that. It will be in the next release. There will be a button on that share option for your service calls where it will create an activity. As you know, when you're sending out any sales and purchase transactions at the moment, there is a slider button to create an activity. So what it does is it records the email going out as an activity. So it stamps it so you know you have a record that the email did go out. So without having to even go into Outlook, that you can actually see that it's gone out through the platform. And we'll have exactly the same coming in for the service calls. And of course, actions. All of the different actions that you can perform against your saved service call. So for printing, for sending, to follow, download, to duplicate, to make it recurring. So this is the recurrence that we talked about. And we also have the ability with jot form integration. So if you had standard templates that you wanted to ensure got sent out with your service calls, perhaps again around compliance, that you needed the customer to answer a number of questions or to sign off on a contract, or it can be anything at all in terms of all those templates that you can define, of course, in jot form. You can include those as part of your emails and send them on then to your customer before, for example, a service call is progressed to the next phase or any activities or actions are taken against it. You've new transactions that you can add as well against your service calls, such as sales orders, sales deliveries, and purchase orders. So it's just giving you quick access to those different transactions directly from the sales or the service call screen. And of course, you can create a new call from there, or of course, you're looking at the preview screen so you could edit your service call. We touched on the resource planner back in module 1. I'm bringing this back up again because, of course, the resource planner to plan and schedule service calls is just as important. So this is all based on whether your technician is in the office or whether they're on the road. This is important that you can manage those service calls. So as you know, the resource planner is all encompassing of scheduling not only service calls, but all your activities. We already know about the orders and deliveries. We looked at those in the first module. So when you schedule your service calls or activities, you're scheduling those against your technicians. And in particular, if you want those to appear on the service mobile app. So that's important for technicians on the road. If you're going to utilize the service mobile app, it's important that you have those scheduled in for the right technician so that they can pick them up on their daily tasks and ensure that they're at the right customer site at the right time. So there's lots of different functionality that you can obviously do around the resource planner. And I'm just bringing this up just to remind you of what that is itself. You have simply click on any task to see the details or double click to update it once it's on the calendar itself. It's easy to navigate. So simply just select the employee first, then select the timeline view. So this can be the view that best suits you. Okay, so it's important when you look in the timeline view that it's the one that best suits you as the user. Then select the document type. So I've highlighted here, of course, your service calls. When the WISE panel appears, then click and drag, simply just click and drag the service call onto the planner itself. And of course, this is the important bit. So for service calls, these will appear on the mobile app for the engineer, and they will be notified of same when they open up their app. There is also a map button as well on the resource planner, so you can locate the engineer and see where they are when they're on the road. So all very important with the service calls. It's a great way of keeping in touch with and identifying and visually knowing where the service engineers are, where they're due to be out on the road as well to carry out those service calls. So here's an example here where we have a service call that's been scheduled for a particular engineer. And when they log into the services app, they will see these are my calls scheduled for today. And of course, from there, they can check on the maps to see exactly where they need to go to get there when they're on the mobile app itself. And of course, when they're with the customer on site, they can review the details of the service call. If there's any activities against that service call, they can see those as well. They can, if for any reason, so again, we're looking at items potentially under warranty or service, and maybe if they have to repair or even replace a part or replace a full item itself, and perhaps that item is not in stock or they don't have it in the van, they can say to the customer, well, look, I'm going to order that for you now, and we should be able to get that in the next couple of days. So they can go into the the Sell app, create a sales order if, again, around permissions, if they have the ability to do that, or they can simply deliver directly from the van itself. So where they have the stock in the van. So there again, all around warehousing and where the stock is located. So if there's always a certain amount of stock available within the van to issue to the customer, then you can deliver directly from the van as well. And that will open the Deliver app. So there's lots of great things that are integrated already around the service mobile app for the technician and to aid and support the service as it takes place. So before adding service calls, what needs to be set up? So we have a couple of things here. There's an option where you can auto close service calls, and that's simply just a tick box where we give you the option when you have defined a resolution against a service call, do you want the service call to automatically close? We have the ability to define skill sets for technicians. And I mentioned this earlier on, and this is important, I guess, around compliance. If you want to ensure that the right technician takes on the right job, so the right service call, and perhaps there's a certain list of training, of components of training that they need to have in order to carry out that particular job. But this is where you can define the skills required for those technicians. What will happen is when you go to set up a service call and you assign that technician to the service call, if they don't meet all the requirements for the skill set, you will get a red line error and it will stop you from adding the service call. So really that's just another way of compliance, ensuring that the right person can carry out the right job at the right time. And of course, what we introduced in the October release is SLAs. So service level agreements. So these are important. These are very important to us, obviously, as a service provider to you, and important in all different types of industries. So this is the ability to define agreements. So whether it's by region, so the number of hours. So we do it by hours at the moment. So for example, in Ireland, you might decide, well, for all of our Irish customers, we have an agreement that we will get back to them all within, let's say, 12 hours, for example. What you can also do, though, in terms of those SLAs, it's not specifically, you could have a couple of different SLAs for Ireland and give them all different names. And even for the naming convention, I would say to you, make that naming convention work, something that is familiar to you, your organization, but more importantly, to your team, so that when they are assigned to the customers, that the association with those different SLAs are instant. So they can be whatever you decide that they need to be going forward. So let's just take a quick look at the demonstration in settings and where these all reside. So when you click on the settings menu, which is up on the top right of your screen, and click on the service panel, which is in your module settings. So this is module settings, and I'm in the service panel. You will see here the close service call upon resolution. So you can see where the tick box is available for that. You can also see then the SLA box. So this is where we've added in a grid to define the different SLAs. And I'll show you exactly what that will actually look like when you're setting those up. In addition, which is further down, you also have a panel for skills. So this is where you can enable skill checks. So you have to actually switch that on. If that's not switched on, skill checks don't even become part of assigning a service call to a technician. So when you enable skill checks, what you do is you define the name of those skill checks. So perhaps you've got an overall definition. For example, you can see here electrician, SAP certified, if it was for SAP Business One. Then for each of those, then you can define the problem types and the technician skills. So for each technician, which skills they have already achieved. So if there's certain CPD training that's been carried out and ongoing compliance training, particularly around, anything around health and safety, that you can ensure that each of those technicians have been assigned the relevant skill set that suits them. And again, that just means that when you go to assign the service call, does that person have the right skill set in order to carry out that particular service call? When it comes then to recurring services, so again, all around particularly the frequency of a service call, how often does a technician need to be out on site? Is there an agreement with a customer that you will always call out to them at the end of every month, at the end of every quarter, um, half the year, whatever that, whatever you need to do to ensure that that call out is in the system and takes place at the required time and is scheduled in advance. And you can do all of this by using the recurring service. You saw in the actions menu, and you can see it here again, that in the actions menu against your service call, you simply just click on recurring. Second step is you simply choose the frequency. You save it, and then we have a tab where you can monitor the postings. So that will show you the number of service calls posted so far. You can obviously cancel the recurrence at any stage. You can click to print the recurrence to see what service calls are in ahead for the future so that you can monitor the progress of all of those. So it's another good way of understanding, um, for example, where you have items particularly under warranty or under license agreement and you want to ensure that those call outs are done by the technicians on time throughout the year. We also have a dashboard to monitor all of the different KPIs. There's quite a lot of information on this particular dashboard. Do take a look at it. Some of them are clickables as well. So that means that they will bring you to a grid to show you the individual service calls relating to that value. So for example, my open service calls. So we all understand the difference between my and all. So I think I looked at that in lesson 1. So my would just be anything relating to me, anything that I have ownership of. So my open service calls. Total unassigned service calls, so something that has not been yet assigned to a technician or a queue, or perhaps is sitting in the queue and needs to be assigned to a technician. So that's important. That's an important KPI because it's important that calls are not left unassigned, that they are dealt with and assigned to a relevant employee or technician. We've also got calls by priority. We've got inactive calls. We've got average closure time. So again, another very interesting KPI. Well, how long is it taking overall to close out or resolve the service calls? So you can see there, it's from the time that the service call is actually opened to the time that the call is closed. We have other KPIs here around the calls. So how old those calls are, so the aging of those calls, or calls by queue if you're using queues. And of course, calls by technician as well, and they will all be detailed at the bottom of the screen. So lots to review there, so do take a look. And if the dashboard is something that you can't currently see at the moment, it will be down to permissions. It's down to user settings, whether or not you see the dashboard on screen. The same with any of the modules throughout the platform. So do take a look at your user settings if you're an admin and you need to be able to see the dashboard or for another user to see it. So moving on then to the portal. So I'm not going to go through all of this because I've mentioned, I think already, and even in module 1, all of the things that a customer, your customer, will be able to do or view within the customer portal. So what I want to focus on here is what they'll actually see from a service call perspective. What can they do? So when your customer logs into customer 1, they can come into the service tab if you've given them the ability to do this. They can add a new service call. Now it's limited. So when they add the new service call, it's very limited. You can see there their business partner or their customer name is automatically set. The subject and the details, that's all they get to enter. So simply just what is the issue? What are they reporting? That will of course come through then to the platform for you to manage, and that will come through to a queue as unassigned, and then you'll be able to assign that to a technician. But before that as well, when they've added a service call, the service call will also appear in a grid on the customer portal so that they can monitor the progress of all of their service calls. And again, what they see here is all down to what you've given them access to and visibility to within the customer portal. So what happens when that call comes through? So your customer has added a call through the customer portal. again, you get a notification. So you can see there a new service call has been created for customer one, and of course, depending on the organization, and it'll tell you by whom. So that will be the contact within your customer. So we can see that there. Then in the web app, you'll be able to see in the queues, the unassigned service call. So this is where it'll come into the queues tab for you then to pick it up, change the details, and then assign it to a user and or a technician, whatever is required. So you can see there, you can update all of the information, assign it to a user, priority status. If, for example, against the technician, you want to check the skill set, if it's a specific skill set required in order to resolve the issue, will Sharon have those required skills? You can do all of that as well. And of course, update your call type and of course, schedule that in. So if you want to make sure that the technician or user gets back to the customer promptly, we'll schedule it in now at this stage. So the initial settings, what does it look like for customer one? So we have a self-service menu on the left-hand side of your main menu. When you click into that then, you can make sure, of course, if the portal is enabled or not enabled. And then through the service calls menu, you have various options here. So first of all, do you want your customers to see their service calls? Are you going to allow them to add new service call? Will there be a default queue? Will there be a default handled by? So who is the assignee, which is an employee in your organization? The default visibility, do they see the service calls or not? Now, there are a couple of more steps involved other than that. That's just giving you an overview of what you can do in the initial settings. But this is something, if you do want to tackle directly, you could certainly reach out to your account manager or certainly talk to support further, because of course, there's another enablement for the contact, and that is your customer contact as well and their customer record, to approve them for the customer portal. So moving on to SLAs, what we introduced in October. So this is all your service level agreements. What does this look like? So yes, you can define customer specific SLAs. So setting clear expectations, configure the detailed parameters. So this is generally the service hours, the time zones, and the days of coverage, okay, for the SLA. You can easily assign that SLA then to your customer. In the customer account, you will see we have a new services tab where you can assign that. You can monitor the real response times. So when you set the SLA targets, you can see that then being reported through the service calls grid. And of course, it allows you then to be alert, be aware, and to take actions if service calls are not being adhered to based on the SLA in question. You can analyze, so of course directly on the grid itself, we have new columns that we've added as well, where you can define, again, using the filtered report option, create and define a report that suits you and store that to run that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever you need to do to track and trace all of the SLAs as they come through. So just to remind you about the workflow. So when you first thing is you need to assign the SLA to the customer. So we now have a service tab against your customer. So assign them the appropriate SLA. And this is where I mentioned about the naming convention. Just make sure that that aligns with your organization and what your teams are familiar with as well, and make that work for you. Then when you're creating the new service call, what we work on the basis of is the expected closing date. So what will happen is the expected closing date will now be automatically calculated based on the SLA assigned to the customer. So for example, if the hours of agreement, so what you've agreed to get back to the customer, let's say is 6 hours, from the minute that you add the service call, 6 hours will be added as the expected closing date. It's that simple. So let's have a look again, just in terms of the workflow to continue that. When you go back to the service call grid itself, if you click on the service call ID, you can monitor the progress further as well. And I showed you this earlier on an earlier slide, where you can now see this additional status. So if for any reason this service call has exceeded the SLA agreement, you will instantly see this overdue button and you know you have to take action. Why is the service call taking so long to close out? Is it a case that perhaps it's just that we're waiting to provide them with a replacement stock item? Or is it a case that the technician has been out sick and we now have to assign another technician? Perhaps it's only gone as overdue, or something else has failed within the process. So at least that will alert you then to what's taking place within the service call. In addition to that, you can also do this through the grid itself. So these are the three columns that I mentioned. So these are now available in your column chooser on the service call grid. So you've got expected close date, you've got overdue. So you can, excuse me, you can see there for the first one, we've got a Y as the overdue. So we saw the orange box in our service call screen. But where it's not overdue, I've got an N for green. You can see there the green N, just to show you that it's not overdue. So I know that they're perfectly fine within their SLA agreement, and hopefully the call will get closed out on time. More importantly then, we have the SLA column. So that's showing you the hours agreed for the SLA. So that's displaying the hour, not the SLA title itself, but the hours, so that you can see just by the expected closing date, what's the SLA agreement at 6 hours. And of course, you can also display the start date on the column. So again, here we are, we're building information to analyze further. And straight away, you have the ability now to report, export the information to Excel, or create the report on screen that you need so that you can click on the already created filter report to analyze the information. And particularly if you wanted to monitor a specific customer, perhaps you have one particular customer that you need to monitor those SLAs on, well, build the report, have it stored and saved for you so that all you have to do is click on the button to view that report instantly without having to manually filter through all the columns. So lots of great functionality there with the SLA. So do take that on board and do have a look at that. And as I said, you've got the settings first in settings and module settings to define those SLAs and then assign that to your customer and then track them through the service calls. So now we move on to projects, managing projects. So the purpose of managing projects, well, really the idea here is to be able to schedule all of the different phases of a project, or perhaps it's only one project, one big project, and to monitor all the activities and hours associated with that particular project. That could be phone calls, it could be hours of training, installation, technicians going on the road to ensure that perhaps machinery is installed, etc., whatever the case may be, and that you can then schedule all and plan and schedule all the different aspects of that particular project, but ultimately take it through to delivery and of course to invoice and to get paid for the project. The great thing here was we've actually linked this in with your sales order processing. So where this starts from really is from the sales order. So you take a sales order, you take a service item. So this is where you have a non-stock item. This is where you can assign that non-stock item as a service call related item or for the purpose of the project's function. And once that service call is created with that particular item, you have an action where you can then create the service call and the planned activities relating to that service call, all based on the quantities that you've defined during the sales order entry. So let me just show you where that is when it comes to the workflow. So the first thing we have to do is for the non-stock items that will be included in the service calls created from sales orders for the purpose of project management, we have to ensure that they are ticked as a service call item. So when you are creating or editing a non-stock item, you will see here a box for create service calls. We just have to tick that. And then secondly, we have an actions button. So when a sales order is added for that same item, and if it contains any flagged items as service calls, you will be able to click on actions, click on create service calls to then create a service call based on that. Now, what will happen there is you will have the ability in the advanced entry on your sales order to define the number of activities or the hours per activity as well for that particular service call. So for each phase of the project, you can basically break it all the way down. So basically one or more activities will be created. You can edit the line to see the details. So I'll show you that on the sales order during the live demonstration. The activities will be used for scheduling the work, very important, so you can plan the resources, plan the technicians or consultants in our case. When we're rolling out a project to you, we obviously engage a consultant with you on the first part of the project phase, and then we roll out all of the phone calls, activities, could be implementation, installation, and it'll be training, it'll be all of the above. So lots of different elements and activities happening all together. When the service call is closed, you will get an option on screen. So as you close the service call and close out all activities, and now we've decided that phase is closed, it will generate a delivery, a sales delivery, so that'll take the order through to delivery, and of course, ultimately bring that through and drive the billing process. So get your invoice added, convert to invoice, and of course, ultimately then get paid for the project. So it's a great process, an easy workflow that you can utilize within the system. So I'm going to jump right in to the live system and give you a demonstration of what the projects looks like. And I will remind you just real quickly where you can find the settings for service calls if it's something that you're looking to find. So let me just share my screen with you now, and we will share the live application. Fantastic. Okay, so let me just log back in there. Let me just move this down so you can see the full screen, and I will also just expand the screen for you there so you have it in full. So just first and foremost, I wanted to show you, we're currently here on the items menu. I am looking at a service call item, just wanted to show you this. I can see here that it is a non-stock item. I can see here that the create service calls switch is on. And just to show you that, how that's done in edit mode. So when I click on edit on that particular item, I can see the create service calls button is clicked on here. And that's it. It's just a matter of switching it on here. I can see that this item is a non-stock item, so I can just save that. Okay, so that's the first part. Now what I'd like you to do, if we then come over to, I'm also going to use a company that has an SLA agreement, because I want to show you as well that if we look at a service call for items that have SLAs, I want to show you where that is assigned. So let me just bring you into a customer account. So this is the service tab that I mentioned. It's over here on the right hand side, and this is where I have assigned that particular SLA. Okay, so when I click on edit and I go to service, I can simply click on the drop-down list to select the SLA service level agreement for this particular customer. Okay, and those service level agreements, just to go back in here to settings and just to go into module settings, just to remind you where they reside. So here we have the service panel here in the middle, and here is where we have the SLA. So this is where you can define those SLAs. And if I click on new, I get a WISE panel pop-up, and if I define a name for the SLA, and I can just put in job 1, I'm just going to put something in, and I might put in 5 hours. What I can do then is extend here, switch on the working hours. I can specify the time zone. So again, if it's Ireland, let me just, okay, if it's ERA, so, and then the start time, the end time, the days of the week that that SLA agreement is valid for. So to ensure that as I'm adding service calls, that it takes all of that information into consideration, because your hours of agreement for services might just be 9 to 5. And if somebody adds a service call at 5 o'clock in the evening, of course, the SLA is always going to be the next day, the next available hour. So if that was 5 hours, the 5 hours would be added on for the next day, for example. So just reminding you of where those SLAs reside. So just jumping back to the projects. So you saw there that we have an item that's a non-stock item. I'm now simply going to start by adding a service call. So first of all, I need to do is define a sales order, and I'm actually going to use that same customer as well. So let me just pick up that customer. And what we're going to do is come down and select that service item. So let me just grab that for you there. Perfect. So what I can do here is I could just maybe pop in my price. That's fine. I am going to go into the advanced entry because I want to show you this here. So when we're within the advanced entry, or you can do it here on the WISE panel as well, you can see the number of activities. You can see here that the Create Service Call button is automatically switched on. You might decide at this stage that you don't require it for this particular sales order, so you can switch it off for this entry. You can see here that it's going to create one activity, and it's going to be hours per activity is 1. Now, if for any reason, for example, let's say this is training, so I'm going to say quantity is 5 because I want to do 5 training sessions. So I'm going to increase this number of activities to 5 because I want to make sure that I can see those 5 training sessions as individual activities. And the hours per activity, they might only be half days. So 4 hours per activity. So I'm defining all the parameters now against this particular service item. So let me just add that here. So let's just add that now to the line. And there we have the line added. Okay, the quantity of 5, that's fine. And it didn't take my price. So let me just edit that line again. And I'll just pop that in so that we have that updated. But you can see here, even if you're using the advanced screen or the advanced data entry, you can see here the same information is available to you to create the service call, the number of activities, and the hours per activity. So I can click on OK. And what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to save that sales order. That's it. That's the first part. So nice and simple. Now we want to move that into the projects. We want to make that a project. You can see here, there's my intercompany coming up. Mentioned that also in module 1 around intercompany. And we do have a great webinar coming up on the 2nd of December. So look out for that. It's a great way to find out how to have data moving between organizations, utilizing the intercompany functionality and replicating those transactions or items within multiple organizations. So let's just go back here to actions. And if we now click this option here, create service calls. So what this is going to show me for any of my non-stock items. So if, for example, if this sales order contained 4 or 5 different items, I would get a service call for each of those items. Because again, I want the activities recorded against each element, depending on each part of the order. So you can see here the item code description, number of activities, hours per activity, original order quantity. So the original order hours. So you can see there the hours that will be spent in total for this particular project or this particular phase is going to be 20 hours. Now, of course, as you record activities, that may go over or below as and when you update your activities themselves. So let's create the service call. In this case, it's only one service call. It tells me the service call number, which is 198. I can click into it from here. So if I click into 198 and just open up that service call, so just let that refresh. Perfect. When we open up the service call, the first thing I can see here at the very top, I can see all the customer information. I can see that it started today. I can see in the middle here, it's telling me 20 hours on activities with 0 hours completed. But more importantly, I can see what sales order it was created from. So I can see the sales order details. I can see the time on the order. There is no time completed just yet. There's no progress percentage complete. So that will, of course, change as the project progresses. Now, what I should do at this point in time, of course, for the service call itself is I should come in because, of course, all we've done is you updated some of the information, But what I should do is come in and specify the item. I should also associate, if I have projects as well ongoing, link it into the relevant project. If I have a specific contact, I want to change that, I can also do that now. If I want to fill in any other static information, such as the problem types, such as the user, the queue, the call type, etc., I can build and put in all of that information. I can also go in here and add in any details around the project. So I'm just going to put in project. I can populate my custom fields. I can come down here if I wanted to schedule the overall service call, but not just yet. Or if I wanted a specific technician and I want to make sure that they reach the compliance for the skill sets, I can also do that. But more importantly, as I scroll down, you can see there, it has automatically scheduled or entered or added 5 activities. And of course, what I can do with each of those 5 activities is I can edit each one as I schedule and plan, edit the start date, and then put in the dates that that's going to start. But I'm going to show you something even better than that. And of course, we can add and drag attachments to our service call. So let me just save that. And I want to bring you now into our projects tab. So what does this look like from a project perspective? So in the projects tab, this is where you can review and monitor all service calls that are defined as a project. So those that are created directly from a sales order. So I can do this by, as you can see here, starting from the top down, I can do this by customer, by order number. I can look at my projects only. I can look at just open projects. I can expand all lines. I can filter by project code, by order number, by salesperson. So there's lots of different filters that I can apply at this stage. I can create a new project order, which will bring me back to the sales order screen to start again. And I can create a new sales order. So what the screen shows me now in the grid, this is actually looking at obviously all of my current projects in progress. And starting at the latest at the very top. So you can see there, the one that we just added, sales order number 253. If I expand all, or if I just expand this one, it doesn't matter. What it then shows me, so when I expand sales order 253, it shows me it's linked to service call 198. I can see the value, the total value. I can see when the service call was started, when it was added into the system. I can see the value on time. So 0 of 20 hours. We know we added 20 hours for this particular project or phase of the project. It's currently open. Who it's assigned to, perhaps you've got a project manager to ensure that this is all carried out. We can see the 5 activities. And again, we've got the purple click-through. Can you see that on all of those different transactions? Because it means we can now go into see and update. So for example, here on the activity, we can go in to see the different activities that you require or what you've actually set against that particular activity. But of course, most importantly is you will want to go in and edit those activities and assign all the relevant dates and to update the hours against the activity. So for example, if we start off here with 275, let me just complete it just to show you what will happen as we update the phase of a project. So starting here, for example, if we come in to, this is maybe the consultant or the technician, they're going to be going on site and you've scheduled this to happen at a certain day. So again, you can use the scheduled button here to ensure that that comes into the resource planner. And of course, if it's going to be on a specific date and time, that you can make sure that that happens on that particular day or time. And we can just say first training session, for example. And you can set reminders, particularly when you've set something to be scheduled. You can set a follow-up activity if that's necessary. You can add attachments. You can link it to another document. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to close it, like as if we've completed those 4 hours, and I'm just going to save that activity. I can email it, of course, as a confirmation. And I'm just going to come back in here to the projects. So if we just go back into service calls. Let's just refresh the projects tab. And now if we expand on order number 253, and if we expand again to see the service call, can you see here? We've got 4 hours complete of the total value, so 4 of the 20, because we've closed out one of the activities and we've confirmed 4 hours. The good thing here about this visibility is that if for any reason a project goes over time or over budget, this is going to show you the problem. And of course, I've mentioned all along about the custom fields. That's important because the custom fields allows you to add additional information against those service calls and against those activities. So if for any reason you needed to mention anything about going over budget, that the customer might need to be invoiced further, or the sales order might need to be increased in value, that you take that action on time. So as you can see, the visibility around the project and as it progresses. And of course, not only do we see this here on the projects tab itself, but also in the service calls grid. So in fact, on the service calls grid, I know there's lots of columns here, but just to try and show you, we can see schedule start dates, schedule end dates, the overdue for the SLA, but we can also monitor, for example, all the activities around the project time itself. So for example, if you come down here, you can see here activity time. We can see what percentage of that is complete. So even here, and then you can also see the original order quantity, the original order hours. There is a complete original order. You can see the project. There's loads of different columns that you can bring to the grid to make these reports work for you and to build the reports that you require in the filtered report option. So you've so much information around the project, and as it progresses, directly from the service calls grid itself, but also through the visibility on the projects tab itself. So what happens, for example, when I go into that service call and if I decide, well, look, everything is complete now and I want to update that service call and bring it through to billing. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to bypass go, as they say, and I'm just going to come in here to edit. And I'm just going to say complete, just on the resolution. And I'm going to come over here to the status. And this is the other nice thing as well, that if you haven't manually closed, let me just do this. If I click on save and you haven't manually closed all of your activities, it will ask you, do you want to close all related activities? I can say yes to that. And now we have the ordering. So we can build the order line. So do you want to build that order line, that particular line, because that's, let's say that's phase 1 of the project, and you want to bring that line through to delivery, and we'll say yes to that. And what happens now is service call is closed, as you can see there behind the screen, but now we have a sales delivery created and it's 332. I can click on OK and I can see here back in my deliveries in the sales menu, we have delivery number 332 that we saw created. And if you come down here as well, you can see that it is linked to sales order 253. So we know that that's taken it all the way through and I can now proceed and invoice that particular delivery. So that's the full scope of the projects option within the services module. Okay, that's actually brought us up to pretty much up to time, guys. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there are any questions in the Q&A, if you have shared anything with me there that you'd like answered. If there's nothing that you have to bring to the table, of course, I do want to mention, if there's anything that you want to find out, we also have the Help Centre, help.enterpryze.com. And of course, you can always reach out to support for any additional questions that you might have as well around utilising the services module. Super. Guys, thank you all so much for joining me today, and just wanted to let you know, of course, the next module is hot on the heels of this session. We will do a full recap of what we've done here today. And of course, everything is all around procurement and purchasing in the next session. So looking at your suppliers, the purchase process, all the different purchase documents, purchase approvals, what that can look like to manage spend within the organization, setting up Enterprise for the purchases. So what options do you have in the module settings or in relation to your GL accounts, etc. So lots of different things. And of course, purchase automation, how you can simply scan in your invoices and save you time by manually typing those invoices in. Well, that's it for today's session. Thank you once again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next session. Have a great day. Thank you.